part 3 in the series on blue light, screen time, and health. Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. I'm Dr. Janessa, Naturopathic Doctor. To recap, so far within the series, we've talked about melatonin, circadian rhythms, a bit about the physiology when it comes to light exposure, and then last video, we looked at blue light and the incidences when it's been used in a therapeutic way through bright light therapy and phototherapy to bring about health improvements. Now, within this video, we are going to turn our attention to the potential concerns and negative consequences on our health when it comes to blue light exposure. And we are going to explore some of the literature around that. Remember to pick up your follow along freebie notes from the mailing list community. If you have any questions or comments, I want to hear them. Find me on Facebook or Instagram and post them there. Okay, so let's get started. Getting into the cited negative health effects and concerns correlated with blue light, we are going to be looking at two main categories. The first being blue light and damage to your eyes, referred to as blue light hazard. And the second category, talking about sleep, melatonin, and the circadian system. Starting with the topic of blue light hazard. Remember, blue light is of short wavelength. And we see here from this excerpt from the research, blue light has the highest photon energy in the visible spectrum, making blue light hazard a concern. And again, remember, the retina is the back sensory layer of the eyeball. So it's that form of eye damage that we're talking about when it comes to blue light. Here we see a passage from the study entitled Effects of Blue Light on the Circadian System and Eye Physiology. So I quote, "Although most studies on the effects of blue light have focused on the mechanisms responsible for the damage to the photoreceptors following an acute exposure to high-intensity light, some studies have reported that subthreshold exposure to blue light can also induce damage in photoreceptors. Photoreceptors being those rods and cones within the retina. In addition, several authors have proposed that the amount of blue light received during an individual's entire lifespan can be an important factor in the development of age-related macular degeneration. The use of lenses, intra and extraocular, that block blue light, blue blockers, may provide some protection against the development of age-related macular degeneration." So we see here reference to both acute exposure and subthreshold exposure as it relates to blue light hazard. Okay, so here we see a very bold statement from the 2017 paper entitled Global Rise of Potential Health Hazards Caused by Blue Light-Induced Circadian Disruption in Modern Aging Societies. They state, "Light is known to affect human chronobiology more than any drug on the market." Chronobiology, guys, has to do with the body's cycles and rhythms. So again, light is not benign, but in fact very influential upon our human physiology. Okay, so now we're going to transition to the second category, all about sleep, melatonin, and the circadian system. Starting with this reference to the American Medical Association's warning report issued in 2013. Okay, so again, I realize the text is a bit small, so I'm going to read it to you guys. I quote, the American Medical Association, AMA, issued a warning report in 2013 entitled Light Pollution, Adverse Health Effects of Nighttime Lighting. The AMA recognizes that exposure to excessive light at night, including extended use of various electronic media, can disrupt sleep or exacerbate sleep disorders, especially in children and adolescents. The AMA also states that disruption of circadian rhythmicity and sleep from the indiscriminate use of electric light at night may well increase risk of many of the diseases of modern life, including not only certain cancers, but also obesity, diabetes, and psychiatric disorders. Okay, here we see an example of the use of an electronic at bedtime, potentially negatively impacting sleep. With this quote, a recent study reported that exposure to light-emitting e-readers at bedtime may negatively affect sleep and the circadian system. So guys, to speak to that circadian system reference more specifically, so that again is talking about that specific circadian rhythm when it comes to that 24-hour cycle within the body. This one specifically pertaining to, to sleep and to that melatonin production. Again, we see here that blue light exposure, as it influences our circadian clock, has more to do about the timing. So here is a passage from the research I'm going to read to you. Epidemiological studies show a negative association between using electronic devices at night and sleep. According to a recently published study, using a tablet, e-reader, at night just before sleeping while in bed induces circadian phase delay and melatonin suppression, alters sleep quality, and reduces cognitive performance in the subsequent morning. It is proposed that exposure to bright light during the day can counteract the negative effect of using a tablet on sleep. Again, here are additional examples within the research of where we see inappropriate light exposure at night producing negative consequences that night, but then also resulting in consequences that negatively impact the next day. So here we go with the first passage. So exposure to smartphone, blue light LED at night, diminished cognitive functions the next day. Again, seeing that hindrance on health following that light exposure the night before. And then in the second passage here, I'll read it to you. Conversely, LED display exposure at night has been shown to suppress melatonin secretion, increase subjective and objective nighttime alertness, induce somnolence, and impair cognitive functions during daytime among young adults. Okay, so again, we see, those effects that we've seen time and time again in the literature the night before, and then also we're seeing, that that impairment in cognitive function the next day, following that prior LED exposure the night before. All right, that brings us to the end of the time we have for this video, but in the next part, we are going to look at smartphone use, get more into blue blocking glasses, and then I will wrap up the entire series by sharing my ND2 cents and practical health tips when it comes to screen time and blue light exposure.